I'm sat here doing a video interview by Skype this time, and far, far away from me in Canada is Simone Holt, who's a graduate student at Concordia University in Montreal, which, as anybody knows, is in Canada. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for agreeing to kind of be far away and still be talking to me.
My pleasure to be here.
And you're doing your graduate research on the Church of Satan, a kind of ethnographic study.
Yes, correct. So I'm focusing specifically on one group, but I do look at Satanists, witches, and vampires generally. That's my area of expertise.
Okay, thank you. And that's, I mean, the reason I think I was spurred on to talk to you about this was that we've been hearing in the press here quite a lot about what's happening in Oklahoma, and something about people trying to erect a large monument to Satan within a public building, the Capitol building of Oklahoma. And I think many people here don't know what all that is about and how it came about. I don't know if you can give a potted kind of summary of how we ended up with this position.
Sure. So there was a privately funded monument that was of the Ten Commandments that was going to be erected. So even though it was privately funded, it was erected in a public space, legal space, or it was going to be. That was what was proposed. And the Satanic Temple, headed by a gentleman named Lucien Grise, proposed his own Satanic Temple, sort of as a response to the idea that you would have a religious monument within a public space. And so he's challenging the idea that, well, if you're going to allow one religion, then you have to allow all, because ostensibly in the legal ramifications are that you could absolutely allow them all when they're supposed to have a separation of church and state.
I can understand somebody doing that, but of course doing it from not an organized religion like a group of Muslims or Hindus, but doing it from a kind of a Satanistic perspective is quite provocative.
Yeah, and I think that certainly Greaves enters into this with full knowledge that it is provocative and sensational. I think that's part of his motivation and the point. Interestingly, after his initial efforts, there have been a few other groups that have also thrown in proposals, or at least contacted the ACLU, which is a human rights group, to try to challenge this notion even further. How far these particular legal cases will go is a little bit unclear. You certainly have to have not only the funds for the monuments, but also the funds for the lawyers. So that's in progress at the moment.
And before I move on to the next question, the Temple of Satan crowdsourced their funding, I think. They kind of appealed to Kickstarter or something?
Yes, they did, and I think they went over their budget. I think their initial goal was 20,000, and they're now at 28, if I'm recalling my numbers.
That's what I saw,
numbers correctly. So another interesting facet about it is that not only was this proposal done as somewhat of a sensationalized event, the sensation that was created around it also allowed it to be funded by those who somewhat playfully and seriously at the same time are challenging the notion of eroding the borders between the separation of church and state.
Guess we'll never know, but it'd be interesting to see the profile of those that made contributions to the Kickstarter and their motivations. Is kind of intriguing.
I've been reading some of the blogs as since this started, because it's my area, so I'm looking at different commentary. And if I can judge by internet commentary, as we all know, is a tenuous academic pursuit.
Right.
But if I can judge it, sometimes it's a little bit of a joke. Someone says $5, like they claim that they gave someone $5 for it, and some gave a bit more significant amounts. But most of the commentary for those that are admitting that they donated is more that they want to also support the idea that America is not a Christian nation, and it shouldn't be founded on a biblical type of morality or legality.
So there's kind of political motivation as well as any other.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've been studying as part of your graduate work the Church of Satan, which is quite a large organisation, I guess, within that milieu. What's their official, if there is one, response been to all this, both publicity and the activity itself?
Yes, their response has been quite negative. So the Church of Satan began in 1966, and it is one of the first organizations to codify Satanism. So even though most of these self-identified Satanists are currently fighting for legitimacy and authority within the milieu, the Church of Satan did begin it all, in a sense, and presented the philosophy of what Satanism is today in the contemporary time. So because it has been firmly pushed for the notion of separation of church and state, they want a secular society. That's the way that it works better in societies that are more multicultural, multifaceted. And so when this event started to be reported on, immediately the High Priest of the Church of Satan, Peter H. Gilmore, has released several responses, denouncing them in every way, calling it more attention-seeking, also sort of hinting that perhaps this group is just taking the money. But apart from those types of accusations, he's saying that it's counter satanic philosophy. Because anytime you're pushing to have Satanism as more publicly accepted, it's actually counter to what Satanism means, which is very highly individualistic, very much about applying success and drive in your own personal life, and not for public display or view. And I think he also questioned the aesthetics of the statue that included the children, because there's a boy and a girl.
That's what they're looking at it.
Yeah, and he thought that was a little strange. So their response has been quite firm, quite negative, and likely will not change.
I guess as a kind of somebody studying religion, there's rather a range of interesting things going on there. There's kind of things about authority which are quite traditional in the sense of religious history. But there's also more going about what if they believe is actually contrary to the principles of Satanism. I'm not sure it's the right word, but it's something about authority and tradition, but also something about something quite theological in one sense of the term, I guess, going on there also at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that anyone who is studying religion and new religions in particular, because then you can very much see how these different groups, who are marginal groups from the onset, and then when their ideas become a bit more public and often misunderstood, that each individual interpretation is vying for the true interpretation, I put in quotes. So it's an interesting case study of how schismatic groups are looking to the public arena for various types of approval and or at least acceptance, if not approval, because Satanism at its core, the core philosophy, and most self-identifying Satanists would agree that it's really not for everyone. And it's deliberately rather exclusive, and that it's only those that really truly respond, which is to the ideas, which is relatively common with a lot of contemporary religions also, that you have to respond to it, it's a choice, not imposed.
I suppose there's something rather interesting about that. I can see why the Church of Satan might have a problem with this, in that there's a kind of dual thing. On one hand, there's a lot of media attention. It makes a great story. We've seen lots of newspapers far away, even in Britain, being quite keen to write about, look at the statue and to write about Satan. Right. At the same time, there's a real tendency, I guess, to dwell on the attention that's being lavished on you from the media, but at the same time want to say it's a minority interest, it's not for you. So there's quite an interesting tension there between the attention that might be given by the media, and the media wanting to have a look, and the wanting to say this is private, separate, exclusive. This has part of the cachet of many new religious groups is they're not mainstream, they're not what everyone else does, they're not what everybody else in the neighbourhood is part of. That's quite an interesting tension for them to kind of manage, I guess, as this goes on.
I'd like to describe it as a magnet and a filter. So the imagery of Satan attracts those that are drawn to it, and even just the news media, the media knows this. That's why one of the reasons why this story has gotten so much press is because it is titillating, no matter what, and entertaining. But Satanists consider this sort of draw to those that can sort of get beyond the imagery, that see the humor in it, see the iconoclastic nature of it, and adopt it as a critical position, sort of a philosophical position to ask, to challenge the status quo, to be someone that's always kind of looking in the dark corners of human nature and behavior. And so then the filter is so the imagery of Satan also acts as a filter for those that really don't get it. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes them fearful.
Yeah.
And so it's both at the same time. And I think they enjoy that tension quite a bit, actually.
Right, yeah.
And play on it. And it's been there since the beginning. So it's integral, I would consider it, to their worldview.
That's interesting. The word you said towards the end there, that being playful, is interesting. That I guess for me, looking at it from this perspective, all the kind of schism, if that's the right word, all kind of argument about authority, seemed almost to kind of cut away at that very playful core of what attracts many people who are attracted to it. Satanism is this feel about being playful, and arguing about authority seemed a bit of a dead hand on that playfulness. But I guess that's what happens when things get out in the public domain.
Right. And I think there's, even though the playful nature of Satanism remains through most of the groups, other groups, sometimes there's schisms directly from the Church of Satan, but with the internet, many of them develop independently without ever being part of the main group. So scholars just call this the satanic milieu, a phrase coined by Jesper Peterson. And so the satanic milieu, I think that because different groups are interpreting satanic philosophy with differences, that becomes the points of contention. Some are theistic, really very much honoring a deity that they consider active in their life. Satan, sometimes they use different mythologies. Right. Some are not necessarily theistic, but quite esoteric, still talking about other dimensions to human existence. As the Church of Satan is very much, we're carnal, we're only carnal. Their notion of magic has a lot more to do with psychology and biology and even performance art and theater than it does with mystical experiences with external deities. So as soon as that line gets crossed between we're only carnal to external deities, becomes a huge point of contention among the satanic milieu. And they fight about it on blogs, in publications. They sling mud at each other quite a bit.
Well, that's really
the nature, I think, of these groups. Yeah.
Well, that's what the internet's for, isn't it? For people to argue and bicker and fall out endlessly. It's good. And the kind of final question, really: do you have any sense? It's hard to say, I know at the moment, where this might go, or what issues this is kind of raising that for both the Satanists and in terms of whether we'll really see a statue in the Oklahoma Capitol building?
It would surprise me if it does get to that point, in terms of the time and money would be involved. And I think my suspicion is that the point is just to challenge the idea and take it as far as they can. But I think that even among other Satanists that don't agree with the monument, there's still certain kernels of challenging the status quo that would be part of their worldview in different ways. But it's not necessarily they wouldn't necessarily advocate such a public display of what they would see as attention seeking. But the notion of challenge is really quite a foundational idea. Satan in the Hebrew Bible means opposer and adversary. So he's the one that asks the difficult questions. He challenges Yahweh in the book of Job. Yeah. So they take this position as rather serious, but most of the time they would advocate more of it on an individual level, not necessarily in this big public way. Okay, and
that last point particularly is really kind of revealing in that although they might have a lot of discomfort with the public nature of it, with the particular design of the statue, with the way in which it's been done, there's something about the level of standing up to or challenging claims to America, for example, being a Christian country, and they're kind of standing against the main flow of things that seem that everyone accepts, throwing a bit of grit in that seems more in keeping with the Satanist spirit more generally than how they might have done it.
Well, yeah, I think that in terms of if you're asking me where this will go, then the idea of something that challenges America as the Christian nation, whether the statue gets erected or not, this particular idea isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
It's big debate right now. It's heated everywhere, and I think one of the reasons it's such a contentious issue is because there is a receding of the control of what Christian morality is within the United States, and as this recedes, those that believe it a bit more fervently hold on a bit stronger, so that it creates even more tension. Whereas if they weren't feeling so threatened, there wouldn't necessarily be a need to erect a monument, because if everybody's already on board with the idea, there's not necessarily a need for it. So I think that outside of even this particular event, you'll probably see a lot more of these types of ideas being challenged and discussed in the public forum, no matter what.
So just kind of conclude, it might look like, particularly from the outside and from far away, like a sideshow, and not really. It actually raises issues that are fundamental to where religion in North America is headed.
Yes, I think so. Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you ever so much for agreeing to talk to us.
Thank you. It was fun.